Sure, please go ahead.
Okay, on behalf of the Deanship of Academic Development, we'd like to welcome you all. Good morning, Mitch. Good evening, colleagues. We are pleased to have with us today Professor Mitchell Markowski from San Diego University. He will walk us through 2 hours related to undergraduate research, one of the important high educational impact practices. Mitch was the president of the Council on Undergraduate Research. He received a number of awards, several awards. He served as the Assistant Dean of Art and Sciences. He worked with over 130 research students. And we are pleased and we are also thankful to him for accepting our invitation to tell us about undergraduate research at his university and other universities as a high impact educational practice. With this, I leave the floor for you, Mitch. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here with you today. We're getting ready for our fall semester, as I think you are too. So this is a good little shock to the system to actually wear pants and go to my office and get going and think about the fall semester and think about undergraduate research and our research program here at the University of San Diego. I have been involved with the Council on Undergraduate Research for a very long time. And as mentioned, I was the president of KUR. So you'll see KUR on these slides just to give them credit for a lot of the thoughts that have occurred. And currently, I have a $2 million grant from the National Science Foundation to work with 24 departments around the US who are interested in building undergraduate research curricula. So we're working on that project. So I'll show you some of our thoughts and what we've kind of uncovered from working with a diverse group of institutions. So I can share some of that with you. I am a scientist. I know you are too. And so I thought, how far are we away from each other in this conversation? So I looked up the circumference of the Earth is 24,900 miles in miles, for whatever that's worth. The distance between us is 13,313 miles. In other words, we're essentially halfway, almost exactly halfway around the globe from each other, and we're almost at the same latitude. So being an organic chemist, I would say we are mirror images of each other, the left-handed and the right-handed. We probably have quite a bit in common. So let me jump in and just show you the University of San Diego, just to give you a little perspective. This is some of our campus. It's built in the 16th century Spanish style, where our founders were in Alcalá, Spain, and loved the architecture there, and that's what we built as our university. We're a private Catholic institution, about 9,000 students. We're right on the Pacific Ocean, as you can see in the background. You can see the bay and then the ocean. And I'll brag a little bit. We, again, by a number of publications, were picked as the most beautiful campus in the country, which our admissions people obviously love to tout. And you can you might be able to see why, but you see this is the atrium of our science building. It gives you some sense of the style and the influence of this 16th century Spanish style. That's sort of what you see around campus. But anyway, just to kind of orient you to my world as I'm sitting upstairs here in this science building. So I'm going to jump. I'm going to go relatively fast. And by the way, let me just say right up front that I will ask you a whole series of questions. I hope you'll be forthcoming and dispute things I say, add to things that I've said. But I also will provide you with all of these slides. So I don't want you to have to scribble a little if you see something, a reference or whatever. I know what it's like to try to scribble them and you get half of the reference right or something. So I'll provide you with all of these slides after the presentation, so that you don't have to write feverishly right as you go along. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about higher education and the connection between what we do in the classroom and what we do with our students in terms of research. and then ask about why undergraduate research, talk about culture and change and the challenges of building undergraduate research programs. And then in the second part, talk about the curriculum. So I've sort of got it in my head, at least, that the first part, roughly an hour, I don't know how long it'll take, to talk about undergraduate research and culture. And then in the second part, focus more on curriculum as we go forward. So I want to start in a way that I'm not sure most people tend to think this way, but I like to think in very broad swaths. So I would ask, what are the goals of undergraduate research? Because I want to do this right up front, because I will later on talk about what are your goals for doing undergraduate research, and your program should connect to the goals. If they don't connect to the goals should be changed, or the strategy should be changed. So I like to think, what are we trying to do with our students? So we're science folks. We want to impart knowledge to students, develop critical thinking and problem solving skills, a really important point, expose students to great minds and great thoughts and new ways of seeing the world. A really big one here in the US now is preparing them for a career and enhancing workforce. Parents ask that question more than anyone now. What will you do for my son or daughter in terms of preparing them to get a job? It's really quite different than it used to be. We want to educate leaders and citizens and help students find a passion and a purpose in life. Those are some of the goals. And by the way, I'll have lots of lists like this, and I don't assume that they are complete. You may add things to it. That's fine. But I want to give you just a flavor of the thought. So how do we do these things? How do we accomplish the goals? Well, here in the US, we have general education plans. So our students take theology classes, and they take history classes, and they take English classes at a liberal arts college like mine. That's a big part of what we do. Students have majors, they pick minors. There are co-curricular activities connected to their majors. Residential life is a big part. We're a residential campus. Our students live on campus. We have what are called living learning communities, where we have a theme where they live in their housing. Student affairs, all of the things that go on in student affairs with clubs and organizations. And then you get down to high impact practices. That's an important component. I know it's something that's been on the mind of your campus, and I'll talk a little bit about high impact practices today as we go along. Now, if I keep going a little bit further, I ask, well, what are the goals then for STEM folks? Are they a little bit different? I'd say, yeah, all of the above, and certainly scientific literacy. I reinforce this concept of problem solving and critical thinking skills. And then the next one is creativity. I would argue that creativity is something that we fall down on. We don't teach our students explicitly to be creative in the ways that we should consider doing. With workforce people, businesses say they want graduates to take jobs at their companies who can innovate. If you ask them, they want innovation. Companies die without innovation. And so creativity is, in a sense, another word for innovation. I work explicitly with my students about creativity every day. I give them exercises for them to think about their creativity and to grow it. And I think it's an underexplored part. Problem solving and critical thinking skills are much more prominent than creativity in what we do. We want to prepare them for life in a technological world, and we want to give them hands-on experiences. So again, list is not complete, but you can see how you go. So let me put a little burden on you and ask, what are your goals for attending the workshop? If you can use the chat, if you can just list a couple of things you'd like to discuss today, or questions that you might have, things that you might like to accomplish. And if you use the chat, I will try to manage, I have a laptop here where I can check the chat, and I'll kind of see where it is. So if you want to do that right now, jump in and do it. As the process goes on this morning for me, after evening for you, you can add things to the chat. I'll do my best. I'm not great at managing the chat and talking at the same time. My skill set, I guess, is kind of limited, but anything you want to throw into the chat, you're certainly welcome to do, and I'll try to explore some of the things that folks come up with. All right, here we go. There's been a growing push for us to engage our students in their educational process. So the question is, why has that happened? Engaged learning and high impact practices are a big part of what we do now in undergraduate education. So why has that happened? One is a call, and there's a lot of acronyms here, and you may know some of them and may not know all of them, but there's been a call, and I'm not going to go through the list. There's been a call over the last 15 or 20 years for engaged learning activities, and that's come from a whole host of individuals. Down at the bottom, you see George Q, who is the high impact practice person, whole series of people. Alexander Aston, for example, I'll speak a little bit to his work in a couple of minutes. And organizations like the American Association of Colleges and Universities and the National Science Foundation, otherwise, everyone pushing for us to engage our students. And because we now know from the high impact practice world that these have tremendous impacts on our students as we go along. So here are the high impact practices. I'm assuming some of you know a fair amount about this, and maybe not all. I'm not sure. I'm not going to go through this in any great detail, but there are 10 of them. But I want to make one point about the high impact practices, and you can read the list here. You see undergraduate research being one of those. These are intensive, time intensive, and intellectually intensive ways of engaging students. And if you talk to George Q, who I've had the pleasure to talk to a number of times, and ask him, how many of these do you think someone should engage in? He'll say 2 or 3. An undergraduate should have 2 or 3 high impact practices during their time in college. So, so you can see that that's not that heavy a lift, I don't think. That's not an overwhelming number. But he says if they have at least 2, hopefully 3 or more, it's going to have a big impact on their education. However, I want to make one point. And that is that not all high impact practices are equal. I think it's a point that's not made extensively enough. So I have the pleasure, I said, of this NSF grant that I have. And one of the people on our grant is Jillian Kinsey. She does the high impact practice data collection and analysis every year. So she is the expert on this. And I get to see her all the time and talk to her all the time. And anyway, she makes this point: they're not all equal. If you look, the little plus signs tell you the intensity or the amount of impact that it had. So if you start there, senior capstone on the left. So senior capstone, the amount of deep learning overall is two checks, 2 pluses. And this is a crude scale, but she's got much more sophisticated. I turn everything into a simple little version. And in terms of reflective learning, so senior capstones, reflective learning, just 1. If you look, though, you can easily quickly pick up that research with faculty, undergraduate research, and service learning are the 2 most intensive of the high impact practices in terms of their impact. So in other words, these 2, research with faculty and service learning, are beyond the other ones. For example, I love study abroad. I teach in London and Paris and Florence and Auckland, and I'm totally committed to it. But notice that it has a much smaller impact on students, even though it is one of the high impact practices. So undergraduate research then is sort of a star, even in the high impact practice world, so that we have that sense. And then I just wanted to make one other point about the high impact practices, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today. It's very variable from discipline to discipline. And you can see that the study done on first year students, which you find over here on the left, and then finally on seniors, I'll only focus on the seniors. This is the percentage of seniors who did research with a faculty member. And you see by discipline, the biological sciences almost half the students. So they're out front. Physical sciences are not too far behind. And notice engineering, 34%, not bad, much higher than most, but still that's only about 1/3 of the students who when they become seniors have done undergraduate research what a faculty member. There's a question in the chat about what is service learning. Good question. The question about service learning. Service learning is being engaged in, say, the community at some nonprofit organization in the community and doing what we call service, but connected to a research project. So they might be working with a homeless shelter, doing research on how do people become homeless. What is the homeless problem? How do we help people get out of the homeless situation? So that's what service learning is. It's a real world example of doing research. So it's really for an undergraduate research in the community. So that's a powerful way for students to connect in a lot of different ways. All right. Okay, so then the question that comes up, I've just mentioned high impact practices. So let me kind of shift things a little bit. And let me pull up the chat if you don't mind. Yeah, balance, practices. So a lot of things to chew on. So now I want to ask about faculty, and I'm shifting the conversation from high impact practices, which is a student-oriented set of activities, to asking, why do faculty at undergraduate institutions do research? So you can be at a research university or an undergraduate institution, and you probably have undergraduates there. So why do you do research in any form? So I'm shifting to the faculty side, and you can read the list. And I'm not a big one on reading all the lists, and I know I kind of overdo the numbers of things, but certainly we as faculty do research because we get great satisfaction out of it. We're trained as scholars. We want to keep doing our scholarship, and so we want to explore our interest and enhance our creativity and achieve our research and goals and contribute to our disciplines, and our departments and universities expect it. We like to stay connected with other scientists and collaborate with people. And then finally, we might want to connect it to student learning and student outcomes and so on. But my point is, faculty want to do scholarship. It is the way we're trained. It's in our DNA to think about doing research. And so we ask, well, why is that? I would argue that I think of research as creation of new knowledge. I think it's one of our most innate desires. I think it's deeply embedded in us to be creators. We all have our own creation stories. So I can list things that people do. And again, just a short little list: baking bread and building houses and sculptures and paintings and writing books and all the engineering things that people do. And for me, synthesizing new compounds, that's my love as an organic chemist. I love to make new compounds, create something new. And I think that's a real driving force for what we do. And I like to think that we can share that with our students, that they get that sense of creation as they go ahead. All right, let me flip back to the student side. And I'm going to make this argument with you. And I'm going to manipulate you and kind of work you through a little process. And see where we go. So this is how my story goes right now for this little slice. Alexander Aston has done a whole series. He has more data on college students than anyone in the world. And when he extracts it, this is my simplistic version of Alexander Aston's incredible lifetime of looking at students and the impact of various things on students. And this is the list in order, as I extracted from Alexander Aston, of the things that actually have the biggest impact on students in college. So this in a way is related to the high impact practice, but a different way of looking at things. So this is what Aston's data shows. One, the most important factor that has the biggest impact on students' cognitive learning, satisfaction, affective learning is one, their peer group. By far has the biggest impact of all. The second one is the quality and quantity of student interactions with faculty outside the classroom. And it's painful to think I spend all this time teaching organic chemistry in the classroom, and my impact is probably not as great as anything I do with the students outside the classroom. Tremendous impacts. The third one is the level of student involvement. Are students involved in clubs and organizations and student life, campus life, feeling it's like being a home. It's like you have a home. The campus is your home. You feel that it's your home, and you need multiple homes. And then the last one that's kind of funny in a sense to my students when I show them this is the amount of time spent studying. It has way bigger impacts than simply higher grades. It's a proxy for commitment, I guess, is really what it is. Let me just say that if you look at this list, the top two things are relationships. The top two things are relationship with your peers, relationships with the faculty. So now we're on to something, I think. Now we're asking, well, how do we bolster those relationships? How do we get students? I tell my organic chemistry students this, what the data is telling you here is that if things are going well, then it's pretty good. You should feel good about it. If things are going badly, blame it on your friends. That's it. And get some better friends, academically oriented and so on friends. But it's relationship based. But I'm focused on the second one, obviously, the relationship between students and faculty. So what will that relationship be? And I would argue the answer is undergraduate research. The answer, by the way, to every question I ask you will be undergraduate research. So we just throw that out there right up front. It's all about undergraduate research or other relationships. There are other ways to do it besides undergraduate research. But to me, undergraduate research is such a powerful way because it melds the interests of the faculty to do scholarship with the needs of the students to do to engage in relationships with faculty. So faculty have tremendous impacts on students, the direct impacts on student outcomes. Aston has 185 environmental factors that he studied, looking at all sorts of cognitive and development and satisfaction and so on. I'll show you a couple in a minute. And let me just try to lay it out for you really quickly. This is my simplistic view of Aston's tremendous work. He puts people into two camps. He puts faculty into two camps: student-oriented faculty on the one side, they're interested in student development, and research-oriented faculty on the other side, defined by their publication rate, time spent conducting research, commitment to research, and so on. And I'm simplifying it. This is a continuum. I mean, you can be both of these things, and you can be in the middle somewhere, and you can be on the end. So it's much more complex than I'm doing it. I don't do justice to his work. But the point is, the question becomes, what happens when students are engaged in a campus that is largely student-oriented compared to students who are on a campus that is largely research-oriented? That's the question. And here you go. And I wrote about this on the research side quite a few years ago now. Attending a college that's strongly oriented towards student development impacts positively on student satisfaction, most of the cognitive and affective development. This is positive. If students at a place where most of the faculty are student-oriented, there are positive impacts on faculty ratings, quality of instruction, general education, way beyond what you would predict. All of these things, growth and writing skills and so on, way beyond what you would predict based on their incoming characteristics that Aston has all the data on. And there's more: commitment to a philosophy of life, growth and leadership, general knowledge, public speaking, majoring physical science area, kind of a throwaway, but that's it. This is all positive. This is great. You have got to be on a campus if you want your students to thrive that is student-oriented. And if you're not, here are the negative consequences. If you engage in research and you do not involve students in that scholarship, and you are a research active faculty member, you are having a negative impact on the undergraduates at your institution. And I get a lot of pushback on this point from my colleagues in English and history and so on who don't engage in undergraduate research activities. But I have the educational literature to back up my side of the argument. And I buy into this. Research-oriented, if you're at a place that's research-oriented in terms of the faculty, there are negative correlations between a whole long series of things. Fewer students are satisfied in all sorts of ways. Fewer students graduate with honors. Grade point averages go down. Leadership skills are not developed. Interpersonal skills are not developed, and so on. So the question then becomes, well, then where do we go with this? What do we do to make this work out? We do undergraduate research. How do you meld the interests of the faculty to do scholarship with the needs of the students to engage in the faculty in a meaningful, academic, purposeful way, where we keep the faculty's interests at the forefront to do their scholarship and publish and get grants and all those things, and keep the students' needs at the forefront? And the answer is undergraduate research. Bring those things together. I think it's a powerful, powerful message, and it speaks to the importance of connecting those two things. Let me just make one last point about it, and that is, you can do this in other ways. It doesn't have to be the only way for faculty to engage with students. Does not have to be undergraduate research. I'm simply saying it's such a powerful way because it's the interests of the faculty and the needs of the students brought together. Anyway, undergraduate research, I can give it a definition. You can read the definition. It is something that makes an original contribution to a discipline, and it's a relationship. It's a connection between faculty and students. I'll I'll throw this up here and breeze through it, but the American Chemical Society has, I think, a beautiful statement about undergraduate research. It goes on, it says, well-planned research should help undergraduates acquire a spirit of inquiry, initiative, independence, sound judgment, patience, persistence, alertness, and the ability to use the chemical literature. I just find the language really, really intoxicating in that way. So we know that it works. There are lots of data that shows that it works, and I can answer any questions that you might have about specific things related to its impact. But the impact is strong and it's powerful, and I can list some of them here. There are greater gains in learning, all sorts of content mastery and communication skills, and all sorts of related kind of things. There are increased connection to and retention within the major. So there's lots of data now showing how many more students feel connected to their major and do better. All of the Aston stories connect. Stronger enrollment in graduate education, increased employment in major related fields. Students are better prepared when they leave because of their undergraduate research experiences. Greater participation in campus intellectual activities, and integration into the culture and profession of a discipline. They're able to make the leap from studying chemistry to being a chemist in my department. And I think that's an essential thing that we should be working on with our students. There are 4 characteristics. I'm going to do this really quickly so I can keep moving forward. There are 4 characteristics of undergraduate research. Mentorship, so that's the relationship. It's focused on the student. Originality, that is, it should make a contribution to the discipline. It should be novel. There's a long argument about whether it should be novel just to the student or novel to the discipline. There's a big difference. Some people argue either side of that, but it should be original. I believe it should be, in my world, publishable and fundable. That's my standard. And if it's not, then I need to come up with better ideas, frankly. Acceptability, that is, it uses the techniques that are employed in the discipline. I can't tell a group of engineers what that should be. The engineers can sort it out among themselves what those acceptable techniques and methodologies are. And then finally, something that gets lost, I think, in the translation sometimes is the importance of dissemination. I think it's really important. Our standards should be pretty high for undergraduate research. They should be, there should be a tangible product at the end. It should be publishable. It could be a poster that a student gives at a professional meeting. It should be critiqued. It should be peer reviewed. I mean, that should be the standard. I always argue that if you're engaged in undergraduate research, and for example, you may not have graduate students, so you only have undergraduates, you still should generate high quality ideas and projects. It'll take you longer to do them. There's no doubt. I can't, with my undergraduates, my 6 to 8 undergraduates in my lab every semester, I can't compete with someone who has 12 to 15 graduate students and 3 or 4 postdocs. And so that's how that started. So the next little prompt is, give me some reasons that people don't do undergraduate research, either as an individual faculty member or the university itself. What are the barriers to doing undergraduate research? I think some of the comments in the chat speak to this challenge. How do you engage undergraduates with low research experience to conduct impactful research, for example? That is an absolutely fundamental question. And in the second part of this session, in the second hour, I'll talk about how the curriculum is one of the ways to get students prepared to go into a lab and engage in some scholarship activities. So the other one, there's a comment in the chat about undergraduate research versus graduate research. Where do you draw the line? I do think it's you need to decide what the goals are. What are the goals of the department? Are the goals to support the graduate students and not support the undergraduates when it comes to research activities. If that's true, there are negative impacts then being imposed on the undergraduates. So the question then becomes, well, how do you take advantage of the graduate students and have them mentor the undergraduates, so that relationship can be a really powerful way to move forward on that front. And a lot of you are commenting on the challenges of bandwidth. I assume that's bandwidth for the faculty and for the students. That question is a really fundamentally important one. How do we balance these challenging expectations here? When I do workshops with different campuses, I get a feel for what the campus is. A number of the campuses have what we call non-traditional students. So they're not 18 to 22-year-olds. They may be returning students. They may be single moms getting a degree. They may be students who are first generation, that is, no one in their family has ever gone to college before. They may work 2 jobs to pay and help support their family. So how do you balance those things? And that's a really difficult thing to do. And again, I will use the curriculum then as a way to try to get at those challenges, because it's unrealistic to think a student who's working 2 jobs and has a full load of classes and lives at home with his or her family and is helping take care of a sibling or something can spend 6, 8, 10 hours a week in the lab doing work. So we'll have to try to think through how that goes. The bandwidth for the faculty is a really critical question. How do you do this? And the simple answer I give is you try to find a way to build it into your workload. So here, my workload is I teach 5 classes a year, 3 in the fall, 2 in the spring, including my labs in that. So this fall, I'll teach organic chemistry lecture and 2 labs. And this spring, I'll teach 1 lecture, 1 lab. That's 5. But we build undergraduate research into our workload. Our workload is actually 6, but we only teach 5 because we all get credit for doing undergraduate research. So for us, it's really important that it gets built into our workload. Otherwise, it's an overload. Otherwise, it stresses and strains everything we have going as we go along. So if you think of the reasons, what are the barriers? The barriers tend to focus around resources. Do we have support to buy materials or equipment or chemicals or supplies or anything like that? How do we pay students in the summer? So if they're going to do summer research, how do we do that as opposed to them getting a job? There are lots of resource questions. And then, of course, there's time. And that's the other one that I've spoken to. And I think the curriculum is a way for us to try to work our way through some of those issues. So here are some of the resistances that I've heard stated. And I will say that they're legitimate resistances. Undergraduates unable to participate at a meaningful level. We hear a lot of our math colleagues say that. My math research is so complex that by the time I prepare a student to get to the level where they can make a contribution, they're graduating. So that's a perfectly legitimate resistance. We can design things around that. Departmental disciplinary culture does not encourage it. This is by far, to me, the #1 factor in whether a department engages in undergraduate research or not. It's a cultural issue. The culture doesn't encourage it. The culture doesn't support it. A faculty member here in the US going through the tenure system, they get no credit for it, maybe in their department. So why do it? So it's a really important question. There's a lack of compensation or resources at time. So there's a question in the chat: does undergraduate research need to be funded? And the answer is yes and no. I mean, for us here, we are very invested in summer research when we're not teaching with our students. So the answer is, yeah, we need funding to pay the students and pay the faculty summer salaries so that they can engage in these activities. but you can do it if you don't have a summer program. You can do it relatively cheaply. When we do all these workshops for the Council on Undergraduate Research, and we have people come up with a scheme for what their goals are and build their program. So we usually start on Friday, like 4 p.m, go all day Saturday, Sunday till noon. So it's a pretty intensive experience. They come up, though, they leave with a series of goals and strategies, who's going to be responsible, what the timeline is, and so on. My point, though, is most of what they put down is really not resources aren't the problem usually. It's not a money thing. Let's put it that way, especially as you're growing the programs. It's not usually. When you build up to want to do summer research and so on, it does need funding. So someone in the chat saying that they're lucky that you have funding throughout the year, because it's a huge advantage to be able to do that. And we work really hard at trying to make sure we have. And then finally, the last one I list here is too much work and time involved. You know what? It is. It really is. The payoff is way after the activity. So yeah, it's hard work. It really is. There's just no two ways. And that's why I argue it should be built into workload. Because when it's built into workload, the university is sending a message to the faculty that this is an important activity and you should get credit for it. And when it's not built into workload and it's just an add-on to what you do, the university is sending you a message that it's not that important. I believe that's true. And so that's the way that plays out. How about some of the advantages you have? So I've already seen in the chat, you definitely have some advantages in terms of funding, in terms of certain departments who are engaged in this, that there's a fair amount of undergraduate research already going on. So I would challenge you then, if that's the case, you should be thinking about sharing what you have uncovered, what you have found, what are your advantages and what you've taken advantage of to build your programs. Because one of the things we all need are more examples of successful programs and little tricks, little things that people have done to make it work. My department, for example, traded off some general chemistry laboratories to build some funding for undergraduate research. There are a lot of little tricks that you can come up with as you go. All right, so let me change the emphasis a little bit and think about, if you're the change agents, how do you go about this transformational change? And this will lead us eventually into the second part of this, which focuses on the curriculum, where you will really think about being a change agent. How do you do that to make these transformational changes? And so I want to make a little case for transformational change, just to expose you to some things. Maybe you've seen this before, maybe you've seen some of these before, and so on. And someone in the chat saying the university supports conference attendance, which is huge, getting students out. That is a big one. So you've really got a lot going on. You got a lot going for you in terms of a commitment to doing this. I'm not an expert on organizational change. I've read a lot about it and talk a lot at workshops, and at some point came to the realization quite a while ago that we're all change agents. And so we should understand a little bit about organizational change. And so there's a lot written about it in business schools. This is the one that kind of resonated with me the most. So John Cotter, he has a whole series of books about organizational change, really well done. But it's a nice kind of bite-sized way to think about any change. This doesn't have to be undergraduate research. This could be any change you want to make on your campus. So Cotter talks at first about establishing a sense, and this is, you got to roll through this in Cotter's mind, like sequentially. You'll have some going on at the same time, but you're going to need to work your way through. You got to establish a sense of urgency first. If there's no sense of urgency, people are not going to change. There's no compelling reason to change unless you have some. So what's the urgency here? The urgency when it comes to undergraduate research is, we know from the educational literature now how powerful it is. And it's something we really should be doing. We don't want to have these negative impacts. And there's a big push and call for it from employers, from funding agencies, from universities, and so on. So the urgency is there. Create a guiding coalition. Who is the group? I'll push you on that when it comes to the curriculum. Who are the groups who are the people in the group that are going to engage in these activities? develop a vision and a strategy. One thing I read about organizational change that really stuck with me for years now was someone said, and I don't remember who it was, he said, if you can't create in the minds of the people you're dealing with a vision of the future that's better than the current state, you will have no chance for people to change. You got to create a picture in their head, a real picture in their head, that this is what their world will look like if they do this, and it's so much better than it is now. And that is a compelling way to think about lasting change. And then the strategies associated with doing that. You got to communicate it. You got to have broad-based action, generate short-term wins. So bite off some little things. So if you have students from the chat, if the university pays for students to go to conferences and give presentations, your goal might be to have every department on your campus have students going to professional meetings. It might be to double the number of students who go to those, whatever those are, but take little bite-sized pieces and go forward and then celebrate them. It's a big way to move. Consolidate the gains, produce more change, and then finally, anchor the new approaches in the culture. Cotter will argue over and over that if you do not put it make it part of the culture, you go right back to step one. It's the culture that drives it forward. And so if there are just a couple of people in a department doing these things, and it's not part of the faculty review process or resource allocation and so on, it's not part of the culture, and it's not going to be sustained if one or two of those people then leave. All right. So what about change? I want to talk about change. And let me pull up the chat so I can see where we are. So one of them says, all engineering departments offer an elective undergraduate as $495, but not many students offer the course that is time consuming compared to other senior electives. Excellent point. And I might press you this way. Why is it an elective? And this is, I don't want to go too far down this path in this conversation, but the biggest change in my department that we ever made, we had lots of undergraduate research going on for decades. The biggest change by far is we required it. About 10 years ago, we bit the bullet and we require undergraduate research of all of our students. And the reason was we think it's the most powerful way of learning chemistry. And I was arguing, and I am in organic chemistry, why do we require organic chemistry and we don't require undergraduate research? Let's get rid of organic chemistry then. Silly argument, of course, but the point being, once you make that commitment, now and it has been difficult. I don't want to make it sound like we have a lot of students doing research, a lot of activity, and it's overwhelming to the faculty, so it's not. But students, know how challenging these things can be. Hopefully the payoff is also obvious to them, but it can be, and students will pick easier things at times as we work through. One question is why undergraduate research is not a concern to universities some time ago. Is it because of availability of internet or something else? I think part of it is that, at least here in the US, the push for undergraduate research came from funding. That faculty at undergraduate institutions doing research with undergraduates, that they were doing very high quality work, but they didn't have the funding to do it. And all of these students were being ill prepared for graduate school. So the argument was, when they go to graduate school, they're going to be expected to do research. We should be helping train them as undergraduates for preparation for that. And that's how it really started. I think due to ABET requirements, not the case anymore. Yeah, I think professional societies like ABET or the American Chemical Society have also pushed it. But I think it was driven by a resource need here in the US at least. And then the educational literature. The educational literature just started being compiled and showing the importance of these things as people work their way through. I'm still stuck a little bit on this question about, students pick a simpler course than the 495 course. And I think it's something all of you probably think about, but but it's a tricky one. And I'll talk about the curriculum because maybe the curriculum will be another way for us to get out of it. All right, I want to go relatively quickly through this next section. You'll have the slides if you're really interested in it, but I just want to show you some of the things that have gone on in my mind about institutional change. And this came from, it's 20 years old in terms of the original thought. And that was the American Council on Education did a study of about 28 institutions who were interested in changing things, had nothing to do with undergraduate research. They wanted to have more technology or more diversity or different admission standards and so on. They followed these schools over like 5 years and asked what really mattered in terms of changing the culture. What were the things that had the biggest impact? And so a colleague and I, Marcus Webster, turned this into a question about undergraduate research. So how do I use the ACE studies and connect it to undergraduate research? And so that's what I will show you, because I want you to think a little bit about culture as we work through it. So here is the sort of summary of changing institutional culture from this study. First of all, it requires leadership. So if you asked me what the most important component of institutional change is, I would say number one is leadership. I would say number two is leadership. And number three is probably leadership. Without leadership, we're wasting our time. And when we think about leadership, though, we need to think of we fall into the trap sometimes, think of university leadership as being the president, or for us, the provost or the deans and so on. You got to have faculty champions. Faculty have to drive these efforts rather than simply administrators. And they need to meet somewhere top to bottom, bottom to top, however you see it, in terms of moving things forward. You need to create new mental models. That was sort of my vision statement of a little while ago. The external pressures and internal conditions support the activity as we work through that. There need to be collaborative efforts and appropriate levels of infrastructure. So on my campus, for example, we work with admissions, the admissions people. We're an expensive institution. It costs about $72,000 a year for everything, room and board and books and fees, and someone's paying $72,000 a year. So we work with the admissions. We tout undergraduate research to incoming students as one of our hallmark programs, that you will be able to work with a faculty member in his or her lab. You will have this personal attention and relationship. You will build your portfolio of sorts. You will learn all the tricks of being a chemist. You will become a chemist. We will prepare you for the workforce. We will prepare you for graduate school or medical school or dental school or pharmacy school or wherever. And so we work with admissions. We work with fundraising and so on. We work with a lot of people on campus to help us do these kinds of things. So the collaborations are really important, and there need to be some appropriate levels of infrastructure. You need some resources, but again, it tends to be near the bottom of the list if we want to change the culture. So I'm going to breeze through this relatively quickly so that we don't run out of time. Just reading the chat, we used to allow the capstone project, which is required to be a research-based course. Now it's an interesting, we can talk about that when we get to the curriculum. Changing institutional culture requires leadership. The leader needs to make strong cases for it, craft an agenda, develop connections among a whole lot of people. Senior administrators need to support it and be involved. And you have to have talent across the campus working on these kinds of things. So I'm just kind of breezing through this little section about what leaders do. But leaders develop supporting structures, create incentives, provide resources. So that's an important role for administrators. But leaders focus the campus attention on the change issue. I knew that we had kind of won the battle, if there was a battle, when our president would go out and give talks and talk about undergraduate research. And he did this routinely. He saw it as a signature program. If you ask me what the signature programs on my campus are, I'd say there are 3 of them. One, living learning communities, where students live in the dorms and have an intellectual component in their dorms. So from day one. Undergraduate research, the second thing, and study abroad. We lead the country usually in percentage of students who study abroad, 80% or something. I know your campus has a similar kind of focus. But our president talks about undergraduate research, and he stays on that topic, and it really matters. Leaders work within a culture while challenging its comfort zone to effect change. And leaders plan for change over the long term. This is a long-term effort that goes. So what are the strategies that people then use? One, you need to identify those leaders and make sure they have the capacity to work on these issues. A lot of times we ask people to do things they're more than interested and willing, but they don't have the time, and it kind of falls apart. You want to hire faculty to embrace the message. So it's a lot easier to bring them in already who are advocates. Hire administrators who do the same, bring in people from all over campus. We have teaching and learning centers, kind of campus-wide activities where we embed undergraduate research kind of conversations. Development is our fundraising, admissions, public relations. We do lots of magazine articles and so on about undergraduate research. Offering workshops, campus committees, engaging the Council on Undergraduate Research, which I think is a powerful way to do that. All right, so that's leadership. So let me keep rolling on this, and then we'll be in a pretty good place to talk about the curriculum. How do we get new campus models? Foster conversation, engage with outsiders like you're doing right now. Hopefully there's some value in that. Generating seminal documents, something that we're all pretty poor at from what I've seen. I've worked with about 700 institutions in our workshops over the years, and it's amazing how we don't document. What was the goal? Like, why did we made this transformational change to require undergraduate research in our department? A number of years later, no one can remember exactly why. We don't document things very well. Cross-department teams are really powerful ways to help move things forward, giving presentations, and we always talk about how important it is to have trust in a department to move these things forward. So what are some strategies? Generate a mission and goal statement for undergraduate research. It includes a rationale for why you should be doing it. There are a lot of reasons to do undergraduate research. You might want to build up the number of people in your major. You might want to increase your graduation rates. You may want to better prepare your students for graduate schools. There are a whole long list of reasons. You may want them to think of themselves as engineers earlier than they do. Whatever it might be. In my department, when we started requiring undergraduate research, our motivation was to enhance the intellectual climate in our department. That was it. We were not worried about our graduation rates or preparing students for graduate school, but we wanted a more vibrant intellectual conversation going on all the time. So students are helping other students put a poster together. Students are helping another colleague interpret some data. Faculty were helping a student develop an experimental, and there was a kind of a buzz around, and it has been absolutely the case that's been the most successful part. So that was part of our mission and goals, and it worked pretty well with some tweaking as we've gone along. Reach out beyond the campus and think beyond the campus. So we think about leadership, mental models, and then there are other factors. So success or failure with the change does not depend simply on strategies. I mean, what exists in a department has a big impact in terms of moving things forward or leading to resistance of things moving forward. There has to be a climate of goodwill. Just as an aside, I was the chair of our theology and religious studies department for a couple of years. They were having some issues in terms of leadership. This was about 3-4 years back, and there was no way that we could move things forward. It was not possible to move things forward because there was not trust and there was not goodwill, and we worked through that and came out the other side better off. But still, you can't move things forward unless people trust and have that goodwill towards each other. The institution has a favorable external environment, so you're well positioned to be able to do these things. And then one thing that we have found, leaders stay long enough for the change to take hold. It's unbelievable how many people come and go when it comes to administrative jobs, especially deans, department chairs. There's this constant movement, and it's really debilitating at times for the things that trying to make things go forward. So here are some strategies: celebrate your unique history, recognize share external conditions are ripe. So I've said that before, there's a push for this to happen. Relate the fact that most graduate programs in the sciences expect undergraduate research prior to acceptance. These days in the US, you don't get into a graduate school in physics, chemistry, biology, pick your STEM major without having done undergraduate research, which is another driver. Graduate schools have driven the push for more undergraduate research. So then a couple more, and then we'll take a little break. Why is change easier at some institutions? So this is a big component of the ACE, the American of the ACE study that Marcus and I were looking at, and that is why is it easier for some institutions or departments to change? The first was transforming institutions have propitious external environments and internal conditions. And that really is, there's enough stress on the system. You have to stress the system. There has to be a push to change, but you can't have too much pressure. So it has to be sort of just right. If there's too much pressure, people are paralyzed. They can't move forward. So if you got to have just the right situation, which means you need to make sure you know the timing of these kinds of things. Change leaders display attitudes and approaches that facilitate change. The leaders matter greatly. They help people develop new ways of thinking, and they pay attention to the change process all the time. I've seen departments who have moved to more undergraduate research faster at least, because they put undergraduate research on the department agenda every week if they had weekly meetings. It was just there. They had a conversation about it every single week about some aspect of it. So they kept the attention on it. They kept it front and center. And so introduce things at the right moment, frame it in terms of what it can do for faculty and students, get the campus to invest in the process with grants and donors and fundraising, and always identify advocates. And then finally, when it comes to this change part, changing the culture is one of the most difficult changes of all, by far. That's what it's mainly about. Circumstances need to be right. The leadership has to be right. The connections need to be right. And faculty champions are essential. If you don't have faculty driving this, it's not going to stay moving forward. All right, one last thing, and I'll make this case relatively quickly, because if you're really interested in this, you can pull up this book. This book is called Transforming Institutions. It came out a couple of years ago, and we published a chapter in this one on our theory of change. So the question is, what is it that leads to transformational change in our project? So our project of 24 institutions, and what were the factors that helped change occur? So we talk about departments doing this, and this is jumping into the curriculum side. But these are the 6 conditions that we have identified so far. 1, you have to identify multiple and diverse campus leaders. One campus leader is not enough, because campus leaders come and go. You need redundant leadership to maintain interactions and sustain transformation. So it's got to be more than one person driving the train. Secondly, campuses that have moved forward understand the levers for change. What is it on your campus that helps drive things forward? You need to think outside the department. How did people capture resources or make changes? What are the ways and tricks that happen that work on a particular campus? 3, using assessment results. So I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the curriculum side. 4, have communication, decision-making strategies that keep it front and center. So I just mentioned this point. It's got to be there all the time. It can't just come out of the closet every once in a while. It's got to be there. Exploiting synergies among UGR's undergraduate research. Undergraduate research work with related initiatives on student success or high impact practices. I have been arguing that these campuses now, like my campus, has an Office of Undergraduate Research. Mistake. That was not, that it made sense at the time. What we should have is an Office of High Impact Practices, where we bring all of these high impact practices together and the synergies associated with it. And that would be a great way, because you'd have study abroad, and for us, service learning and undergraduate research and living learning communities all in the same framework. And then align the goals of undergraduate research work on curricular and cultural transitions to broaden institutional goals as we work through. All right, finally, What are the trends in undergraduate research that I've seen? One, involving students early, first and second year research opportunities. We have a program on my campus now where we fund students who have been accepted, say for this fall, and they have been here working for 10 weeks in the summer. They're essentially high school seniors getting ready for college, and it works great. So students who are in their first year, second year can do research. You don't have to wait to the capstone to do research. Undergraduate research in all disciplines, so it's all over now. Project related to service learning, as I was describing, other campus initiatives. We're a Catholic institution. We're very big on Catholic social justice. And so a lot of our students engage they're in political science, history, theology, whatever, and then integrated into the curriculum. And we'd say, all right, so let me stop there. This is what I would do if we were doing a workshop live. I'd have you start writing out your short-term goals and your long-term goals and who'd be part of that coalition and how you're going to assess it and so on. That would be the way we'd go. So here are the conclusions of the first part of this. Undergraduate research is thriving. I hear it's thriving on your campus. I hope that it's thriving in all departments. Building programs that support the students, the faculty, and the institutional needs. Undergraduate research is really powerful because it has a tremendous impact on students, a tremendous impact on faculty, and a tremendous impact on institutions because of the power of the intellectual model that goes with it. A large part of the focus should be on changing culture, and that part's really important. And the curriculum is a good way to get at that, and that's what we will do. All right.
Okay, then we're going to have, is it 10 minutes break, Mitch, or?
It is now 9:45 in my world. So that's 10 minutes. We're back at 55. And
okay,
we'll take it there and talk about the curriculum.
Colleagues, we take 10 minutes break for prayer and then we'll be back in 10 minutes time.
And that deals with the curriculum. Before I do that, I want to, there's one question in the chat that I wanted to deal with. It said, what are some of the KPIs? I don't know what a KPI is you use. For example, does it make sense to require a publisher outcome at the end of the project? So I can answer that question, which is, it really does depend. In our case, say in my department and many departments in the US, the expectation is that your work is fundable, that you could get external research grants from it. So in order to get external research grants from the National Science Foundation or the National Institute of Health or private foundations, certainly you need a publication record. So so in that point, you know, at some level, there's an expectation that publications occur. However, the time frame is always the challenge. So if I have students work in my lab in their third and fourth year students, you know, the work may not be done by then. So a lot of the times the publications don't come out till a number of years after they've graduated, which is unfortunate, but true. We tend to expect a presentation of some sort at an outside meeting. So we have meetings on campus and students give presentations, but the standard tends to be go to a professional meeting and give a presentation, and hopefully it will then find its way into a publication. That's sort of that's a pretty common standard for undergraduate research. So every project doesn't get funded, every student's work doesn't get published, but that's where it plays out. All right. So let me roll into this conversation about the curriculum, because a number of the questions have already sort of addressed this question, which is, how do you prepare students for doing undergraduate research? How do you prepare students to go into a research lab and do research? So if it's a capstone experience and they're showing up as a senior, fourth year student, how are they going to make progress on the project when they're just starting at that place? And the answer for us tends to be, let's try to take advantage of the curriculum, and let me show you why. Here's just a few more little pushes. So a lot of what I'm giving you, and I know you have sort of rich undergraduate research experiences in a lot of places on your campus, but I'm just giving you some ammunition if you need to convince someone, some references and so on. So the Chronicle of Higher Education has had a whole series of issues, not issues, but presentations about undergraduate research. They asked me to do one a few years back now, about 5 years ago, in a push for more undergraduate research. So I'm just trying to convince you it's coming from all angles in terms of where it goes. I've always liked this one, infusing research into the curriculum. It's a little bit old, but I kind of like it. It came from the National Science Foundation because it felt like a Star Wars movie in my head. Picture an ideal university. Has a pervasive culture promoting collaborative research between professors and students. There are internet links, so you can see how old this is, between research labs, libraries, and students. There's an emphasis on discovery-based learning techniques throughout science and engineering curricula. This should be the norm. Often, however, it is not. But this is the point being, for 25 years, the National Science Foundation has been pushing undergraduate research. But this is the point about the curriculum. When undergraduate research is not a requirement, so most departments do not require it, and I have pushed and argued that that is a gold standard that a lot of departments need to get to. When undergraduate research is not a requirement, the typical mode of conducting benefits only a few students. So you have a few students in your lab. In my department, we have 160, 200 majors, and we have to get every single one of them in the lab. And it's hard. But if you don't require it, how many of those 160 or 200 students will do research? A quarter of them, maybe? We saw from the HIP data what the numbers were. In engineering is about a third. Well, there are few students who have the time and interest to pursue special projects not directly related to any of their coursework. Their capstone project, they may decide not to do the research capstone, 496 or whatever you called it. Integrating authentic research activities directly into existing courses enables students taking such classes an opportunity to reap the benefits of undergraduate research. This, for us, is about inclusion. This is about the single mom, and it's typically a mom, not a dad, going back to college, working, kids at home, not with the time to be in a lab 2 afternoons a week and summers and so on. The curriculum is a way to do it. So it's an inclusion thing as much as anything else. We know high impact practices. I don't need to go through this, but this is some things that Jillian keeps pushing us to think about. But the features, when you think about what you want to do, you want to put them in circumstances that demand meaningful faculty and peer interaction. That's undergraduate research. Connect their learning to real world settings. That's undergraduate research. Offer a coherent and challenging curriculum. That can be undergraduate research related. Provide students with frequent feedback, time on task, think in new ways, and respond to novel situations. That's working in the lab. So there are big components to that. So why integrate research into it? You can read through this. I don't like this slide already as I look at it, but I'll just simply say that the first one, and we'll just focus on that. Scaffolding undergraduate research in our curriculum will maximize student learning, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills, yes. And career preparation, yes. And provide a path to capstone research. In other words, this is the answer to the problem of how do you get a student showing up as a senior for a capstone research experience, never having done any research before this. How do you get them to make meaningful results in a short amount of time? And the answer is you got to build a curriculum that leads them to that place. And that's what I will describe to you today. And you can read the rest of it, but we don't need to. A research supportive curriculum. It's a purposeful integration of the specific components and activities associated with successful independent research throughout their undergraduate experience that can help cultivate the skills needed to prepare students for successful research experiences. The curriculum is a rich place. It's sitting there. And you know what else about the curriculum that's really important? We as faculty control it. We can manage the curriculum to do, I mean, I know the American Chemical Society is out there telling us things, and ABET to a certain extent, and other professional societies, but we control our curriculum and we can use it to the advantage to make it more research rich, because we know that the impact of a research rich curriculum is going to mirror the impact of undergraduate research to some extent in terms of the positive impacts on student learning, student satisfaction, and all those other kinds of things. So we want to focus on the evidence-based pedagogy and implementation strategies. What are those? So there's a lot going on in this slide, and I want us to think through in the subsequent slides what it means. Developing research-rich curricula. To achieve cohesive curricula that initiate students in a culture of inquiry and research, use the evidence-based strategy of backward design to build vertically scaffolded research-rich curricula. And secondly, a scaffolded research-rich curriculum implies a structured curriculum to help students gradually and intentionally build research skills and guide students to greater independence. So there are two things going on. We want it to be backwards design. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we want it to be scaffolded. Scaffolded meaning that one course leads to the next, that 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 leads to the capstone experience. And so students are prepared and ready to do it at that point in time. We think of this as sort of a student as scholar model. And I think it's language that we stole from Hodge. Hodge came up with this student as scholar concept, and I like it a great deal because we like to think as a faculty as scholars. We should also think of our students as scholars. Use a discovery paradigm, place undergraduates at the center, move from a passive, externally motivated experience. And there are 3 stages that I want to go through to some extent, at least. The 3 stages are foundation courses, intermediate courses, capstone experiences. You have first-year students, you have that second and third year place, and then you have the senior level capstone experiences. And there's a lot of background that goes with these concepts. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit about what a foundation course could do. So let me describe, I'm a chemist, so I can talk about chemistry a lot easier. So a foundation course in chemistry would be general chemistry. Students would come in, we'd hand them the experiment, the written description of the experiment, I should call it, and they would sit there in their 4-hour lab that week, and they would go through, and it tells them to titrate this, and then wait for the color to change, and then change the pH, and whatever they're doing, and they work their way through. That's the kind of cookbook model that we certainly use for a long time. The question is, well, how do you make it more research rich? How do you make it seem to the beginning at least of them acting like a chemist, being a chemist? Inquiry driven, ask questions and have them try to answer those questions. So in terms of student development, they move towards becoming active participants and beginning to accept responsibility, which is a big part of it. The faculty role is to create a climate for them to be able to begin this process, build on some of their knowledge bases, explore some little more complex problems and questions, but we're still feeding them a lot of it. So we're not expecting them to do too much in terms of owning it yet. Provide multiple perspectives, help students analyze experts, offer timely feedback. Possible assignments might be discussion boards, analysis of scholarly work, having them read primary literature, but we're sort of providing it for them still. But it's asking them to think more deeply about how these things play out. When you get to intermediate learning experiences then, so these would be second and third year students, you start thinking, a lot of people have started thinking of it as a good place to do group projects. Engineering is really good at this. So in terms of student development, students experience being a part of a larger community. So they think beyond their own world to the bigger point of what do chemists do? What do engineers do? What are kinds of questions they ask? What are the kinds of things they're trying to address? What are the advances that they're trying to make? And now students start to think about what they might want to do. So they're owning it a little bit. The faculty are going to give them, my light turns off, offer students opportunities to practice authentic research and discovery, teach students to function productively in research, and assist students in generating their own solutions. And I will say that possible assignments, structured team-based research projects, data interpretation, research proposals, you got to build these into the curriculum. And I'll show you an example of it in a little bit. Excuse me. One thing I'll simply point out in the experiences that we've had with people building these intermediate courses, there's still quite a bit of direction that goes in. It doesn't work well yet to have students just find things that they might be interested in and then explore them. There has to be sort of a more focused. Students get choices, but they're from a menu of choices. That's what we have seen works best. And then finally, you get to the capstone, and I think you probably have a sense of what the capstone would be. Now they possess the habits of mind, critical thinking, research skills, self-authorship that prepare them. They've thought through what it's like to be a biologist or a physicist or behavioral neuroscientist or whatever it is. The faculty empower students to design, implement, reflect on their own inquiries, learn to and apply lessons to future inquiries, invite students to integrate ideas from multiple disciplines. So we do this a lot, addressing problems, possible assignments, conference presentations and publications and theses and all that kind of stuff that goes on. It does sort of lead to the question of who is driving this. Whose research are the students doing? I've had students come to me with research ideas that they want to work on, and I've taken them on. And frankly, for me, it hasn't worked. It just doesn't lead to the kind of results that I would have hoped for. So I basically have my students working on my broad research ideas. They pick the parts of it that they're interested in and work on and become experts in. But it's still, I'm driving the bigger question of what we're working towards. So as we work on. So the question that would come up if we were spending, a few days together, the question that I would ask you at this point is, which courses might you want to make more research rich? And why are you selecting those? Which ones would you want to do? The second part of that, which is related, is do you want to start from the beginning courses or the capstone courses? Do you want to go from the bottom up or the top back as you develop your courses? Which ones would you like to do? Can you identify some courses? And if you go back to what Cotter said, in terms of organizational change, he said, in essence, bite off some little pieces. So when I say which courses might you want to make more research rich, it might be a matter of simply saying, I'm going to build these 2 modules into my introductory lab, and they're inquiry based, and they're asking a student, here's some data, here's some information, analyze it, do something with it, create an experiment that would help you answer these questions and things like that. So it could be, some pretty smallish bite-sized pieces. You don't need to think I'm going to transform my entire curriculum. In the NSF funded project that I talked about earlier, the one that we have with the 24 institutions, they are revamping their entire curriculum. And this is a 5-year project. So it's taking them 4 years now, 1 more year to go, to create an entirely new curriculum. So that's the commitment that they made to be part of it. It's really extensive. But thinking about going from bottom to top or top to bottom is a fundamental question about how you want to proceed. All right, so a couple more related issues, and then we can look at some examples. We work in terms of what we call backward design. Departments use a backward design approach to develop scaffolded research-rich courses and assignments that build in deliberate ways to guide students to greater independence and ownership of their learning. So backward design is a big piece of what we stress all the time. And everyone on the project has bought into it by now, certainly by year 1, at the end of year 1. Backward design consists of 3 things. 1, identify learning goals. This was hard for some departments to think about the overarching learning goals for a student in their major. Some of them had it pretty well wired. Others, it was a little more nebulous. It's a little bit harder than you might think to come to a consensus as to what all the learning outcomes for the entire department would be. So you want to identify the desired results that you want. Those are the learning goals. Determining the evidence of which it will be assessed. So we spend a lot of time talking about assessment data. Jillian Kinsey, as I said, who works with George Q in the high impact practices, is on the grant. So she does the research part, and it's really wonderful in terms of the assessment and evaluation part. And then finally, consider the learning activities, instructional strategies. This is where you spend most of your time. How do you create the world that leads to the learning outcomes that you identified in the first step? And when they don't connect well with the learning goals, you either change the strategies or you change the goals. And that's the way it plays out. So backward design has been tried and true now. This is a commonly used approach, and we have found it to be incredibly useful to focus our attention. Backward design forces us to make tough decisions about what content is really needed to achieve the learning goals. I deal with this all the time. Teaching organic chemistry, you can say the same thing, I'm sure, about the courses you teach. They're so dense. There's so much information. I'm constantly asking, do I need to do this, or I'm better served working on this portion, and what approach to this and that, and what can I leave out, what's essential, and so on. And it forces those tough decisions when you know what the goals are that you're trying to get us. It encourages us to think in advance about the evidence needed to document that learning has been achieved. And that's a big part that a lot of us want to skip. And it leads to greater coherence among desired results, evaluation criteria, teaching, learning experiences, which lead to better student performance. But this is hard work. This is not trivial to do. So let me just show you a few of the steps that folks have taken on. Step one, identify the learning goals. I don't like the learning goals so much as I'm going through them. These are way too broad, but typical broad categories for learning objectives might be increasing participation and retention of STEM students, promote STEM disciplinary knowledge and practices, integrate students into the STEM culture. Those are really broad. They'll be much more impactful as you get more specific in terms of what the expectations are. And I just do this. I just wanted to throw out some things for those of you who might be interested in looking at these, at some examples. I just wanted to pull it up so it's easy for you to access and get. You can see these. So for example, the one here, scaffolding the development of student research skills for capstone experience, is a multidisciplinary approach. It's a pretty nice piece of work that I think you might find useful, for example. So you can see how those play out. Step number two then is the assessment part. So this is a continuum. This whole thing is a continuum of all the kinds of evaluation and assessment that you could take on. And it can be simple as informal checks. So way on the left here, oral questions, observations, informal dialogues. I mean, we're doing that all the time in the classroom. I think I'm pretty good at gauging where my students are in the classroom. I'm always kind of checking in. I can see their eyes. I can see their body language. I can see the questions that seem to be coming up in their heads. I mean, those are assessment of how things are working. Modest, but real. Then you get to the traditional middle ground of quizzes and tests and lab reports and written assignments that you can easily grade and get a sense. These can be open-ended prompts. And then finally, performance tasks, presentations, proposals, papers. What is the outcome that's coming from this, and how is it received? So there should be a collection of evidence gathered over time rather than a single event. And it's a complicated part of the conversation. And finally, step three, select appropriate learning activities and instructional strategies. So other institutions have done it. I just flashed up a few references for you that you can look up, but you need to tune it into your institution, because your institution is not my institution. We may be mirror images, but mirror images are different from each other. And so we need to adapt it to our own local environment. But you do need to make it part of the culture. And that's really important. And then lastly, as far as this step three goes, these projects are an opportunity for innovations. We've seen people come up with incredibly exciting changes to their curriculum as they innovate and think through what the goals might be as they're working through. All right. So now let me make this a little more challenging to read. But I want to give you a sense, if I can, and let me try to slow down a little bit, give you a sense of what we have asked institutions to do. So what is it that we want them to be able to do? So this is detail in the backward design vertically integrated curriculum framework. So this is a worksheet that we have a lot of worksheets. And by the way, we have a book contract to publish all of our work, and it'll include a toolkit, and the toolkit will help lead you through the kind of changes. So if you want to change a capstone course, here are some things to work through. Here's some examples of what other people have done. So that'll be part of the book. We'll have a toolkit come out in the spring sometime. But in any case, so this is the kind of thing that we would have a campus department work through. So at the top, the overall objectives, scaffolding, identified learning goals, student, how do you do the assessment, learning activities, instructional strategies. Those are the 3 steps that we just mentioned. So over here, we start overarching goals. So over on the top left, overarching learning goals. And if you work down, you see stage of skill implementation, research skills and foundation courses. I'm going down left into intermediate, and then the capstone experiences. So those will change as the years of the students go on, going from left to right. So some of the learning outcomes, understand and implement the stages of the research project. So these are the overarching learning goals. Effectively communicate with the research team and dissemination of results, and apply quantitative analysis to interpret disciplinary data. So those would be the 3 overarching learning goals. And now you see the different expectations for foundation courses, intermediate ones, and capstone. So if I just say understand and implement the stages of the research process, here's the skill: make careful observations and record findings in an organized manner in a laboratory notebook, articulate a clear research question or problem, and formulate a hypothesis. So that's what they would do in a foundation course to satisfy that expectation in terms of that learning goal. And then you can see the other learning goals, communication 1, I won't go through, quantitative analysis won't go through. But then you see in the intermediate level, so I'm down here on the left still, in the intermediate level, they design an experimental protocol based on sound methodology, align data collection with the research hypothesis. So they're trying to understand and implement the stages of research process as the overarching goal. Intermediate level, that's what they're able to do. They're going to design their own protocols. And then finally, in the capstone world, they're going to evaluate experimental evidence for consistency and possible limitations. So they're going to collect data and manage it eventually, and analyze data sets and all that kind of stuff. So in any case, this is the kind of thing that is essential, I think, to help us really hone in on what we're trying to accomplish and what we want to have our students do. And it's done in a way, if you look at Bloom's taxonomy and those kinds of approaches, which tell you about as students become more capable, we build in more expectations. That goes along with what's happening in this particular world. So that's the kind of thing that we would do in terms of expectations. I'm pulling up. I'm bouncing over to the chat. There's a question in the chat about training faculty members to mentor students at undergraduate level in terms of setting achievable goals, time management, making the experience fruitful. Yeah, that's a really good question. There's now a lot of discussion about mentoring, and the Council on Undergraduate Research has a publication about mentoring and the important component of mentoring. One thing I learned a long time ago, I thought I was doing a pretty good job mentoring my students, and I mean I did a solid job mentoring my students, helping them think about their career objectives and how to manage their skills, manage their time, manage their fall semester work or whatever it was. But one thing I didn't realize is I had a group, and I was doing a really poor job of sort of group dynamics, which were meaningful. That is, there's a mentoring part of individual mentoring, but there's a mentoring part of group mentoring, which I had, as a new faculty member, no concept of. So the answer to the question is it really is important to think about the personal characteristics of the students, what their needs are, how hard you can push them, how much you need to back off on certain students, and so on. But it's become a big part. So if you look up the Council on Undergraduate Research publications, if you're interested in that, they have mentoring ones as they go along. All right, so anyway, this sheet that I show you here is sort of a framework to think about the kind of backward design and scaffolded way of getting at these questions. So let me show you some examples. So again, I just want to show you examples. So here we go. This one I know there's a lot going on, but I think it's of value. So you can see it. I mean, I know I've been talking for a long time, but there's some practical things that I think are of value to you as we go along. So this is a sample action plan. And so this is a plan that a team came up with. So I don't tell you who the team is, the campus. And this was year one. So I'm only showing you year one. And then, so here's year one action plan here in the green at the top left. And then the final desired outcome by August of 2021, which has been put off because of COVID by 2 years now. So they'll actually finish this by 2023. But this is their action plan as they began. So I wanted to show you the beginning of the process. There were times when we show people the end and people are just, I don't know if I'd say overwhelmed. They're like, oh, that's way beyond anything that's realistic. So this is the beginning of the process as they go. So this is their action plan. So this action plan is going to then fold into the questions about their goals and learning outcomes. So this is sort of preview of what we just saw. So the desired goal way over here on the left was prepare for the first site visit. So we do site visits to these campuses a couple of times a year. So we go to the campus, meet with the president and the provost and the deans and the departments and so on, and get a sense of how things are going and what they have going and what kind of support they might need and what we can do. So here are the strategies to achieve the goal. 1, gather and submit requested baseline materials for the KER project. So that's our project. Institutional data and resource documents, timeline December 8th. So they're going to collect this baseline. And then the milestones, what has been achieved the first year. They collected the information. What individuals, committees, whoever are responsible, the leadership team. So each team has about 6 people in the department working on these things. Who's ultimately responsible? Kate and Joe. So poor Kate and Joe. Who are the leaders actually and do a great job. So they are ultimately responsible for that. By August of 2021, how we'll know if this has been achieved, the documents will provide important baseline data about our curriculum. So in other words, in order to understand how to change the curriculum, they need to understand what they were doing in their curriculum. So that's what that initial documentation was all about. How will it contribute to the research questions? I won't go into that. We have some complex research questions that Jillian works through. The documents will provide important baseline. So that's sort of the first thing. Then I go back to the left here, engage the entire department in a conversation about the KER transformations project, which is what we call it. Remind colleagues about scope and goals of the project. So you can see these are very specific goals to move the project forward. So the timelines here, substantive time at the November meeting devoted to this dialogue, leadership team, department chair, curriculum committee chair, and it goes on in terms of that. I'll keep going a little bit more. Back to the left, meet with the dean and provost to provide an update and share early thoughts about our anticipated work on the project. So they're priming the dean, who may need to provide them with some resources or some assistance at some point. And they had the meeting, and the leadership teams were responsible, and all the rest. And so 1D down here, conduct a departmental inventory, timelines, and people. As they work through, meet with the director of the Office of Institutional Research. So they're reaching outside the department to see what kind of data they can get. Finally, down the bottom left, update consultants on the fall semester progress. Finalize the agenda for the mid-February site visit. So they're getting themselves self-prepared. But I'd show this to you because I really want to impress on you how granular it becomes at some point. It really, the ones that we've seen be successful work at this level. They don't have notions, simply notions as to what they might want to change. They don't just leave it up to an individual to maybe make the change or not and hope that it's going to lead to the desired outcome, which you may not even know what the outcome might be. My department struggled with this quite a bit early on because that's the way we were used to doing our business. Our culture was, someone has a good idea, let them go do it. I mean, it's great. We had lots of good ideas. People were doing all sorts of things, but we didn't have an overarching set of goals. We didn't know where they was leading us, and we really didn't know if they were successful. We had a sense that these things were working, but we didn't have any data or anything to support it. So we kind of had to move to this kind of model to help us move. All right. So with a little bit of time left, I'll just say that I'll just show you some things that you might want to pull up if you're interested in this curriculum-based and undergraduate research. So these are reports. So this is the National Academy of Science, Engineering, Medicine report from about 5 years ago now about undergraduate research for STEM students. And it does a nice compilation of a lot of these kinds of data. And what I decided to do is, if you're interested in this, I know there's a lot that you can take on, a lot to read. And so to help you with your workload, I sort of pulled out what I think were particularly useful chapters. You can read the whole thing, of course, but these chapters in particular, I think, do a really nice job of talking about chapter 2, for example, how many different kinds of undergraduate research experiences there are, because I know that's a question that comes up, what should it look like? And it's like, it's all over the map in terms of what it looks like. Chapter 3, undergraduate research experience in a larger system. So that may not be so specific to your world, but it's a pretty useful thing to think in a big world, research university world. How does this play out? Considerations for design and implementation. So again, that kind of thing. And just to think a little bit about the different kinds of research experiences, individual faculty research groups, that's the apprentice style, that's the STEM model, that works great. Capstone experiences, internships and co-ops, people working and going to school at the same time. Course-based ones, wraparound experiences with academic support programs, bridge programs getting from high school to, or for us, well, what we call community colleges. They're 2-year institutions. They're preparation for a 4-year institution, and so on. So you can see a whole lot of these things. I'm going to skip that one. And there are the other things you might want to read. Integrating discovery-based research into the undergraduate curriculum. So this was again the National Academies from a number of years back now, but really still speaks to the things that people are most interested in when it comes to the curriculum. And the particular chapters there, chapter 3 and 5, especially chapter 5, I think, because it talks about rewards meaning how do you pay for this and how do you make it happen and so on, and challenges of scaling up as you have more and more students. So in the chat, the question is about graduate research. It's been an individual student. Is it the same trend? Yeah, that's a really good question. It is very much a group related kind of thing now. I'm sure there are still individual projects, no doubt, but it's very much a group effort. So my group of 6 to 8 students that I have in my research lab, as I said earlier, work on a common. So we're trying to synthesize metal organic frameworks, whatever that model is. But they're all trying to synthesize different versions of metal organic frameworks with different metals in them, different organic pieces in them. So the project has an overarching goal of synthesizing metal organic frameworks that are very porous, and different students are working on different things. So in a sense, they're all working together, and they then can share techniques with each other. They can help each other learn different ways of doing things that they might need help with, and so on. So it's very much, undergraduate research is very much group activity in most cases. People who do field work, they're all, the students are all working together, collecting data and so on, but it's really good. I think in my department, the biochemists have 10 or 12 students working in their lab. They're completely crazy and overwhelmed. But I think, 5 or 6 students is a good number of students. And I find it personally, 5 or 6 students better than having 2 students. Because when there are 2 students, the responsibility becomes pretty much all me to teach them everything and help them with everything. When the group gets bigger and it gets to be about 6, they're helping each other. I don't need to show everyone how to do this, to work on this instrument if another student can show them, and so on. So there's great value in doing that. Here is one that's that is quite a bit older now, 2007, developing and sustaining a research supportive curriculum. This was, it's what, 15 years old now. This is a very dense publication with a lot of examples, and they don't really go out of style. They, so this one is if you're looking for a lot of examples of how to build curricula and make changes in all disciplines, including engineering, this book has hundreds of examples of doing it. And then finally on this one, the characteristics of excellence in undergraduate research, the core document from Kerr leads you through questions about where you are and how prepared you are and what your needs are to do undergraduate research. You might find that of some value as you work through it. And so we get sort of near the end. If we were doing this live, or we're doing this together over a long period of time, I would ask you the same thing here that I would have asked you at the end of the first hour, which is, what would your short-term goals be? So again, going back to that matrix that I showed you, where they were collecting background information and meeting with the dean and the provost and so on. How would you move your curriculum forward to make it more research rich? Get cut off the top. How do you make your curriculum more research rich? And we like to think in short-term goals and much longer-term goals. We like to think about who's going to be part of that effort. So in your department, if you want to do this, who's responsible and who has ownership, and in a sense, who has the power, who has the ability to move these things forward? You can't have 3 assistant professors doing this because they don't typically have the power as a group. Maybe they do, but it's asking a lot. Who's part of your group? We would also ask how you're going to assess it, how you're going to evaluate it. All those kinds of things would be part of what we would spend our time doing. So that's the way it plays out in terms of the curriculum. And so I go, okay, well, where do we get to this in terms of in the end? I'll just make a few comments about it. One, undergraduate research is here to stay. I don't know, its usage will continue to grow. It's a demonstrated positive impact. I don't know of a single institution where people are doing less research now than they did at any point in the past. There may be places doing the same amount, but I don't know of a single place. So the trajectory of undergraduate research is clear. It's going to increase, and it just continues to increase. It puts stress on the system, but we know that it has tremendous positive impacts on students. It forces faculty to think about how to get funding and what publications and what reasonable expectations are and how to mentor and how to support students and how to create novel ideas and all those kinds of things that research does for us. But we know ultimately it has positive impacts on students. So it's going to drive it forward. The second thing I'd say is, as one of the high impact practices, I've seen it become much easier to sell undergraduate research on our campuses. Deans get it in ways that I would say they had competing interests in the past. Now they get it. Now they know that now that it's one of the hips, all of the deans that we work with and the provosts who oversee the deans have bought into it. It's a really easy sell now. So it's something that we should take advantage of. It also means that we should think about ways of connecting one hip to another hip to undergraduate research. So people are now trying to connect study abroad to undergraduate research. So do undergraduate research abroad, those kinds of things. So connecting the hips. Third thing, transformational change requires leadership. I've said this a dozen times already. It really is about leadership and keeping undergraduate research front and center. It requires a group to do that, and a group to do it over long periods of time. That part is challenging. early on, people used to ask, how long do you think it takes to build an undergraduate research program with these components and this and that? I'd say, I don't know, 12 to 15 years probably to get it all in place. But in the life of a university, that's not much at all. In our lives, it's significant and meaningful, but I think it does take a fair amount of time to get from one place to another. Look at the transformation project that I've been describing to you, 24 institutions. They're working with us for 5, going on 6 years in a very intensive way with a lot of support and help and assistance. So start small with some of these curricular changes, take some little bite-sized pieces out, see how it plays out, celebrate the successes, move on, and that's good. As far as the curriculum goes, though, backward designing and vertically integrating the outcomes is now tried and true and really should be the approach. So whether you want to go from top to bottom or bottom to top, it should be scaffolded. You should think through what the goals are at each level and at each point in time. And I think that is a way to fly. And finally, I like to just sort of end with this thought that it's just fun. When I talk to new faculty about it, they say, why should we do this? I go, at the end, it's fun. To me, it's the most fun you can have. When it comes to organic chemistry, I love being in the lab, love working with my students, and I enjoy the ride. So I will stop the slides there. Our time is just about up. If there are any final thoughts or comments, I'm more than happy to give anyone who wants it the last word before we call it for you a night.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mitch. Questions? Well, if there's no questions, I think there's a lot in the chat, and you have covered a lot. Everybody is, will take a lot valuable practices with him. So we'd like to really thank you, Mitch. Thank you very much. And you gave us a lot of references we can refer to as well. Thanks a lot.
Someone has a raised hand. Ahmad has a raised hand, maybe?
Somebody raised hand here. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I'm not sure.
I like the boats you have in the background.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I'm not sure. I was away for maybe 20 minutes. I'm not sure. Was there anyone who explained our experience in undergraduate research at KFUPM, which goes back to 2014 and has been successfully improving and increasing the involvement of students in research over the years. So did you have anyone who commented on that, or?
No, not really. I mean, I've gotten some sense of it, certainly through the chat, through some conversations, but I would say this. I mean, the Council on Undergraduate Research, a US-based organization, has been looking for partners around the world.
And we thought the help of CUR at I think 2016, and we had a consultant from there who visited us twice, and we worked together on putting the strategy for our undergraduate research. And now we have an undergraduate research office. We do have several venues for engaging the students in research. One of them, or the first one of them, was the course, undergraduate research course. Now almost all departments have undergraduate research course. Then we started having the SURE program, Summer Undergraduate Research Experience. Now it has been running successfully for 2 summers. Also, we have the semester long grant for supporting the students working with the faculty for 1 full semester. We call it U Explore program. And we do support our students to attend conferences. So this is in brief. Also, we have a workshop or training short course for our students on research skills. We offer it twice every semester, and students like it. And every offering, at least we have 70 to 75 students participating. Nice. So the message is spreading out, and we, semester after semester, we have more students, more faculty are engaged, and more awareness over campus. We do celebrate those achievements. We have a big poster session at the end of each program to show the products of the students. So this is part of the story. I like just to share it with you. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, so you're reaching a point, it's an interesting one, I think, where you reach a point where, I'll just use Kerr as an example. Kerr needs you more than you need Kerr at some point. And so you can provide lots of great examples. Your story is a great story. How do you go from point A to point, maybe you're at point M and you want to get to Z, whatever it is, your story is a great story, and people need to hear your story and how you did it and what the obstacles were and what the challenges were, what worked well, how did it happen? That's what people love, stories. They want to hear the stories. They don't, the results are okay. They want to hear the story. You have a great story to tell.
Excellent. What is the venue to tell this story? What is your recommendation?
I think the Council on Undergraduate Research has a publication called the Kerr Quarterly. It comes out. No, I'm sorry, it's changed its name now. It's called Surf or something. I don't even remember what it's. But the Kerr has a publication, and they have those kinds of stories, and
interesting.
It's a great way to get
document.
Out
there. To document our work and.
We had a conference a few years back in Qatar.
Yeah, we attended that one. Yeah, it was 2016.
Yeah, and we learned a lot. I mean, it's a different style of doing things, of course, and but yeah, I think people would love to hear your story. It's a great story.
Thank you for the advice. We'll do.
Yeah.
I think, Ahmed, there is one thing also, and one of the things which is important to take again from this, is that the importance of that the research course be a mandatory, not elective. This is one of the things you need to
think about it in the future.
Very so, yes, because that was emphasized a lot by Mitch, and its impact,
I think in some departments, like chemistry department, it is part of the curriculum, compulsory course. But some others, it is elective.
Yes.
It's a pretty big undertaking, so got to be careful.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say my last comment is, if any of you ever make it out to San Diego, I'd be more than happy to entertain you.
Okay, great. And we also would like to see you here at this end of the way. Well, thank you very much. Okay, what is it now? Is it 9 o'clock? It's
10:46 here. I don't know what it is for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for staying up.
Okay. Thanks a lot. We'll keep
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sanaullah. You can close now.
Okay, sure.
Okay.